Hello folks, it is the 15th of December and it's kind of cold out here for me, the old geezer that I am. What I want to talk to you about today is how to get from here seeds from here to there. And one of the first steps in doing that is to get these little jewels, Trident seeds, to germinate. And so what I've done is I've been working on several experiments on getting these to germinate, you can say faster, or to get them to germinate at my pace, the way I want them, on a time schedule that I want them to germinate. So what I've done is, now unfortunately at this point I don't have Trident maples seeds or seedlings to show you that are in germination. But this right here is a pack of Japanese green maples, and what I've done is started what I call a 30-day stratification process. Now in that process what I've done is taken a packet of Japanese green maples seeds, placed them into a container with just a little moisture, and then I put them in the fridge to get some cold on them. And now in this pack, so let me say this right now, there is one seed in here of the hundreds of seeds that I have that's actually germinating. And that's the seed right there. You can see that. See that little end? Now there's 100 seeds or so. I don't even see any of the tips starting to break, but that's okay, because this packet was not set or designed to germinate at this point anyway. What this was, let me see, I put these in September, and they were due to come out on the 22nd of December, okay, and that's to give me 3 months. October, November, December, 3 months, okay? Not counting strictly September. But anyway, this was in the fridge consistently from September, and it was supposed to go till, I mean, except for with me just checking them periodically, you know, every 2 weeks or so. They're to stay in the fridge until the 22nd of December. Now, what I did prior to that, I set up another packet, and after 22 to 30 days thereabouts, I started pulling the packet out of the fridge and letting the packet sit on the counter during the day in the warm house, okay, pretty close, right next to the fridge. So when I went in the evening, I just put them back in the fridge, and I would rotate the packet, you know, over and over, because there's moisture in here and you want the moisture to move. And in my case, I might have opened the packet or I may have left it closed, it doesn't matter, okay, but I wanted to move that around, and these things are not airtight anyway, so as I squeeze it, it's going to push air out and the air is going to come back in, so there's going to be some air transfer to freshen up the air that's in there. But the seeds always remained moist and cold, okay, in this case. In the other case, the temperature rose up during the day, and then I put it in the fridge, the temp dropped overnight. And so what does that do? It simulates spring coming on, where you have cold nights and warmer days, cold nights and warmer days, some cold days and even some warmer nights, because you do have temperature inversions periodically where you know, a front will come through, you know, preceding a cold front. Usually there's a warm front. So you've got the change in temperature, but the seeds sense that and it works, okay? So I called it 30 days, but it was actually more like 60 days, 30 days or so in the fridge to get the cold hours that my seeds need. And I'm in Florida now. It may take less time for you if you're, you know, let's say north of Atlanta, you know, in the plain states and such, you know, out north, excuse me, in the Northwest. It may take less time for you. You can probably do it all in 30 days. You know, put 15 days, you know, I'd say 10 to 20 days of strict cold hours on it, and then start pulling it out. And by the end of 30 days, you may very well get your seeds to germinate. But anyway, I live in Florida. It's hotter here. The seeds get all of that heat as they're growing, and so it takes a little bit more cold hours to break that cycle. But you have to make sure the seeds do not dry out in your container while you have it in the fridge. Now, again, I'll reiterate, these are Japanese green maples. I have already planted in flats some of the trident maples that have had as much time as the Japanese green maples that I'll show you later. Plus I planted some in flats that were strictly, you can say, soaked out in the natural environment, and I raked them up from the ground and just put them in flats in my little greenhouse affair. So what I'll do here in a minute is pause this, take you back to the greenhouse, and then we'll continue this discussion. But before I leave, let me just say, in my part of Florida, or Florida in general, we don't have many changing of the color seasons. Now, sometimes we get, you know, cold that comes in and slowly, and some of the trees will turn colors and it looks beautiful. But we don't have the maples, the variety of sycamores and other trees that, you know, that change colors like it does in the north. So I am so happy that I have my trident maples, my Japanese green maples, my zelkovas, my elms, and a few other things, including what's in the pots, Chinese pistache, for example, you know. And I get a color burst for a couple of weeks, and I'm just so happy. A lot of my trees are kind of like me, bald right now, which is fine with me because I love silhouette also. But if I remember to point the camera, I'll show you some of the trident maples in the back which have color in it. But anyway, we're going to talk about these Japanese green maple seeds and the seedlings that I have in the greenhouse, and so we'll pick this up in a moment. Okay, that's a Japanese green maple. Nice color. There's a rough bark maple right there also, and I'll try not to make you seasick. There's a blueberry bush right underneath that arch, and then beyond it are trident maples. And you can see some of the trident maples in the distance there. There's my trident maple field right there. I just love those things. I'm going to walk over here and trident maple field here, which is bordered by a bunch of crepe myrtles, and I like looking in there right now because I can see the rows of trunks So now at this point I'm actually inspecting these trunks to see which ones I want to dig for this season, see which ones I want to keep in the ground and grow on, or air layer the tops out of. But got a variety of color. Japanese green maple, that was a seedling that obviously crossed with the red maple, and so the leaves are red right now. Over there in the distance is the Emperor One, but again, this is my color pop and I'm loving it. Right here at my feet we have pomegranate, a little color change in that. So rather than blind you with the sun, I'm going to pause this again and we'll pick it up. Okay, here we are in my little greenhouse enclosure, and again, the seed pack there was a straight into the fridge, never removed for any length of time. This I did like 30 days in the fridge, and again between 22 and 30 days, and then I started pulling them out during the day while I was out here working. And so in the evening I would put the packet back in the fridge, rotating the pack over, you know, to move the air around and to make sure the moisture is distributed in the packet. I actually had a bit of paper towel in there to kind of wick away any excess moisture, plus it would actually hold the moisture so that the packet would not dry out. So I had that going also. Now you can see the seedlings in here, and I believe I did a video. I'm not sure if I posted it or not, but hey, this is how I roll. I just do what I can do while I am thinking about it. And you can see these seedlings have popped up. You know, they're all over the place. And I believe in the video that I did create before, there was just a few of the seedlings that had actually broken and were germinating out, okay? And I took the packet, 75 to 100 seeds, and I just put it in that little tray and then topped it off with soil and left it. Now I've been in here since, and I've watered this, and I've treated it with the fungicide, to broad spectrum fungicide, to just ward off any dampening off. So aside from that, it looks pretty good. And once these I guess you can say stand up on their own pretty firm, whether they have their true leaves or not, I'll come in here and start thinning this out. Okay, now that tray is a tray of Trident maples, and the time on that is pretty much the same as these Japanese green maples. I don't see anything germinating or sprouting out yet, and they were in the same container packet. So when I pulled out the packet during the day, I would leave them out, rotate them, put them back in the evening. But still, on the Trident maples, I have no success yet on anything breaking the soil. And again, I keep this watered and I treat it with fungicide just to prevent any mold, mildew, fungus from getting into the system. And then right here behind me, there's nothing coming up yet, but this, just as a test bed, I took these out off the ground, just raked some up that were already soaked. You know, I have soaking trays, you know, just to water my plants. If I take a pot, I can sit it in this soaking tray. Well, the water collects there, and it's underneath the Trident maple tree, so the seeds automatically get soaked. So I took some of those seeds and placed it here just to see what happens. Nope, you don't see any labels on here or anything. It's just catch as catch can. If I remember it, exactly what I did to it, fine. If I don't remember it, I didn't need to do it anyway. That's the calendula, which is what we call a bleeding heart. So I'm trying to get that to grow in here and to stay in here year round, because in this area they freeze back to the ground and they might come up from the root, but they are so beautiful. Years and years ago, when I kind of first started out buying and selling plants, I went to this place in Mobile, and I guess you can say the greenhouse had to have been 25 feet tall to the ceiling, and there was this massive wall of this stuff, and it was so beautiful. I just stood there. The owner had to grab me and get me to moving, because I was just standing there watching it, just amazed and enjoying the sight of this just blooming on that wall. I mean, incredible. But anyway, back to what I'm doing here. So now I'll take this packet, plant it in a flat, and see what we get out of that. Because again, I've already got one seed germinating in that packet, which I still have till the 22nd of December to give it the full 3 months of cold treatment. Now, 3 months on the Trident maple is generally what I get before I see some germination. So so that is my norm on germinating Trident seeds anyway, 3 months. And that's why I set my time frame to 3 months, generally speaking, on my general lot of seeds. But this flat over here that has the seeds germinating, I'm trying to create a system or a plan, some thought or idea of how to get these seeds to germinate quicker, so that I am not overwhelmed with trying to deal with hundreds or thousands of seedlings all at one time, because everything is sown at the same time. I want to be able to break it out over time so that I can manage the amount of seedlings I have to deal with at any given time. Does that make sense to you? So if you follow the 30-day rule over here, we know now that the Japanese green maples will, I guess they'll succumb to your treatment of them, and then you can spread that out like you want. Okay, so that's actually, we'll call that 60 days of treating. 30 days in the fridge, again 22 days or so, but 30 days in the fridge, and then you start rotating it in and out for 30 days. And again, if you're already in a cold area, you can probably get away with this with less days, and that's why I say 22 days or so. And then you start rotating in and out, and then you can start dividing your seeds up to sow them like you want. Okay, but again, they will hold up to they'll hold the full 60 days, and even beyond that. So that's what we have on this packet right here. And again, out of the hundreds of seeds there, and all of these seeds are the same, from the same trees, collected at the same time, one seedling has germinated out of this pack, and that's the consistent in the fridge cold treatment. Okay, and they weren't pre-soaked like the Trident maples. Okay, the Japanese green maples, they weren't pre-soaked. They were just moistened, put in the fridge, and there you have it. Now the Trident maples, they're pre-soaked for 3 days. The water is changed daily, or several times a day is fine too. And then the last rinse, I use a broad spectrum fungicide to rinse everything out. That holds down the moisture or the mold, fungus, mildew, and that sort of stuff in whatever medium, and on the seeds when you have them in your cold storage. Okay, so, and if you use lactobacillus, you can add a little of that, especially if you are using leaves raked from the ground, where you have leaves, or I said leaves raked from the ground. If you have seeds that are raked from the ground, which have leaves and twigs and so forth in it, and you don't want to clean them, use a little of that lactobacillus, and it will stop the decomposition process, and it will eliminate the odor from the bacteria and so forth. Okay, so aside from that, I have good success, and I'm confident that my 30-day program is good. So now I can start spacing out my Japanese green maples with confidence. I'm still working on a schedule and a program on my Trident maples to see how I can go with those. On a normal, me just throwing my Trident maples in the fridge, fungicide treatment and all of that, and I've used peat moss. Some folks say don't use peat moss, it will hinder the germination. I didn't have any problems. I've used sand, and I've used you can say perlite. So, and in some cases I've used a combination of sand and perlite. Okay, sand and peat moss, and I've had no problems really with germination. But again, I usually go 90 days on my Tridents, so I'm trying to break that up or better manage my Tridents as far as getting them to break dormancy. So that's the thing with the Tridents compared to the Japanese green maples. So anyway, I hope that helped you. I'm going to pause this, and then I'm going to probably show something else behind it. Okay, here I am at a table I set up. I was going to do this several weeks ago, but the weather came in and I got busy with this and that. Somebody had asked about junipers, you know, about taking cuttings, rooting them, you know, and how to use them. And usually juniper identification comes into the picture also. So what I've done here is set up a few junipers of different varieties, cultivars, just to kind of show a difference. So what I'll do here is, let me start over here where the sun is, and I'll talk about Shimpaku, Sargent Juniper. Okay, and this is really a nice juniper to work with, but in my experience is not as forgiving as some of the other types of junipers. And I've got people in the bonsai club that says their Shimpaku is like always dying on them. They have various problems and they give up on it. And as a matter of fact, these two right here, this and that, I got from one of the auctions because the same person just gave up on the plants because they couldn't get them to grow. Well, I'll tell you, like I told that person, do something different. Okay, whatever you're doing is not providing for the needs of your plant, so you need to do something different. And this is the first thing that I find that people do. They listen to what people who tend to teach and tell you about growing plants or whatever, and yeah, me included, and they don't go outside of the box once they're told something. Look, no one has the definitive word on anything when it comes to bonsai, growing plants, and so forth, okay? Now, we know who has the definitive word, but we're not talking about spiritual things. We're just talking about a tree in a pot. Yeah, I love them, but don't get it twisted. Two different things right there. These two trees, and I had several others which I've grown on and done other things with, including croaked one because I pushed the envelope. But they were pitiful looking little things, and they were all washed out, discolored, because they weren't taken care of. They weren't grown right. And my point was, do something different. Whatever you're doing isn't working. So a lot of times you need to do more of what you're doing. And the problem with people, they believe that junipers don't need water. All I did was put water on these plants, and my juniper was suffering for a while, and I'm thinking, well, what's going on? So I let it dry out, and it looked even worse. So I set it in its container of water to soak, and boom, it started sprouting new growth. You know, within weeks, everything started coming up. Then I could start fertilizing it. And so the problem was not that it wasn't being watered. It wasn't being watered enough, okay, to make sure that the root ball was being saturated and soaked in the middle. And so what I did was, on another juniper, which was a Procumbens nana, I pulled it out of his pot, and lo and behold, the whole root ball in the center, except for the margins of the pot, bone dry. Bone dry. Okay? So I learned, if your plant isn't doing well, you're probably not doing enough of what you're doing. Then you consider backing off. Junipers need water, just like anybody else, okay, or any other plant. And a lot of people will tell you junipers need to stay on the dry side. No, it's good that they dry out sometimes. You don't want them to stay soaking, sopping wet. You know, for example, looking at the soil in this pot, okay, that's a heavy black soil, a lot of organic material in it, and it would not be very appropriate for the juniper, okay, because the roots would eventually rot from too much moisture. But you need to water the junipers. And while I'm talking about watering your plants, no matter what your plant is, if it's a young plant, a new plant, a recent plant, not a mature plant, you know, 8, 9, 10, 15 years old, you need to water it and fertilize it, because you need to grow your plant first before you think about all of the bonsai things that a mature plant requires, okay? And a lot of times people convolute the differences between a young immature plant or bonsai or pre-bonsai with that of a mature plant. The care and requirements change after a while, and a lot of people don't make that emphasis, and people tend to try to do the same thing from the first day they get a plant or start a plant or seedling till 10 years, 15 years down the road. Well, more than likely your plant's not going to survive. But anyway, water the plants. Don't be afraid to water them. But know your seasons, know your time, and don't be afraid to pull your plant out of the pot if the root ball is fully intact. Now, you don't want to pull a plant out of the pot where the roots are not fully infused into the soil and you've got a solid root ball. You know, you don't want to do that. But I can pull any one of these plants out of the pots and it's not going to hurt the plant, okay? You don't want to go breaking up the root ball just to see if it's dry. You'll know if it's dry once you look in the bottom of it. So hopefully that makes sense. But anyway, these are Shimpakus. Now, I grew up here in Florida, and I've had you know, my experience and share with different plants. And this plant right here was called a Sargent juniper. It's Juniper communis, okay? This is Sargent juniper, okay? Chinese juniper, okay? Juniper chinesis, if you will, okay? Common juniper, but this was a Sargent juniper already. Or also, you don't find this in the nurseries very often, but they're very similar when it comes to the foliage, except the color is lighter on this than it is on this Shimpaku over here, okay? I mean, this juniper, I know, and I really do like it, and but it takes more pinching to get it to thicken up. It takes less pinching for this Shimpaku to thicken up. But when you look at the needles and the growth habits, they're very similar, okay? The next thing is someone asked about cuttings. These are cuttings right here. I took these off probably July, August, somewhere in there, and they're from the Sargent juniper, the common juniper, and they're pretty sizable. That's probably 3/8 to half an inch on that, okay? So, and you can see the green right here. They're not drying out or getting away from me. This one isn't doing as well, but I still have green foliage on there, and in the crotches there of a little branch there's something. But again, I did that basically because I was trimming back another couple of plants, and this is always a good experiment. Plus it gives me something to place in a different location. I tend to save plants in different locations from my main plants in case of whatever, blight, infestation, trees falling or whatever, and I'll always have a sample of my plants. I can do that. I can afford that because I have the space here. So these will be in a different location from the plants, which actually the plants that they came off of are across the way. Now again, different plants. This plant here, I hope that comes out. I'm going to make this my logo juniper eventually, and I've been working on it a number of years. It is the Sargent juniper, the common juniper, and I've wired it previously several times. I've pinched it back several times, and now it's due another pinching back, wiring in a heavy regime of fertilization. Also, in another video or two, I've mentioned lactobacillus and fish formula fertilizers. I'm making my own lactobacillus serum and my own fish fertilizer now, and I'm going to be hitting all of my plants a lot heavier with those solutions. Thin down enough they can be foliar, and of course in the right concentration you can do the soil and root ball, okay? So now, as you can see, and as I mentioned before, that this type of juniper is a little more leggy than your Shimpaku or your, and I didn't mention it, but or your Procumbens nana. So all you do is you look at your branch and see where you want to go. Just put your fingers across that area, pinching up, and then everything above my finger there, like up here at the top, you just take your other hand and pinch it off. Don't take shears. I mean, you could, especially since you're not going to be showing it or anything spectacular is going on with your plant. But if you do have a show plant and you choose to pinch it back, you can do a first pinching like this or shearing, and then you go in and you cut in between the growth tips, and then that way you'll have a lot less browning out, because when you've got a mass of foliage to deal with, I tend to hedge trim stuff first and then go back and do my fine work. It gets things out of the way. It lets you see to a closer degree of where you want to go, and then you can do your fine work after that. But to make this thicker and fuller, and you have to force this particular plant to get fuller than you would have to force the Shimpaku, even though it works there also, and this gets thicker. Plus, being a darker green leaf, you get more energy building up and working in that anyway. So when I come through here in a little while, I'll just come pinch that, and with my other hand I'll pinch all of that on the top there. I'll just pinch it right off, and then I'll let this sit 3 months. It'll be full again. Let me see, we're in December, right? January, February, so toward the end of March this will be full again, even fuller than this, and then I'll get back buds also down in here, which is part of what makes this fuller. When I bought this was really leggy. There was very little denseness to the plant, and of course I wired it to this kind of S-shaped movement. You might be able to see that trunk in there to give it some kind of movement, just like that little Procumbens right there. You can see the wire on it, and I put that little S-shaped movement in it, and then you go in and pinch what you need. And here behind all the bushes, look out, there's some jungle in that pot. That's all wild grass that came up in the pot, and I don't have a problem with the wild grasses. I use it as accent. This is a Parsonii, Parsons juniper, that I stuck on that piece of wood a number of years ago, and I did some wiring also. So I'll come in and pinch this also. What I've been doing for these last several years with this is basically just letting this grow into the wood, where I carve the channel to let the plant grow on its own. Now I water it, fertilize it, I put it in a place where it gets plenty of sun, and I pretty much forget about it. Okay, now I go through and I water and fertilize my plants periodically, but other than that I haven't really pinched it back or done any wiring. And so probably this year, 2021, coming up, I'll get in here and I'll do some refining work, and then I'll decide if I want to pay attention to it or just put it out somewhere and let it grow. And of course then I'll decide if I'm going to leave that grass growing in there or not. Usually I just cut that stuff back and go on about my business. Okay, we're going to move over here to the Procumbens nana. There is a garden juniper, which is a Procumbens or Procumbians, okay, but it is not a Procumbens nana. Okay, this right here on the ground, this is a garden juniper. Okay, it is a Procumbians, which means it grows horizontally, grows low, grows on the ground, stretched out. Okay, this right here is a garden juniper. This is a Procumbens nana. That on the rock is a Procumbens nana, and the leaf style is different. You can look at it and tell, and okay, I don't know if it's me or the monitor, but this is not focusing very well. But anyway, You see how the leaves, just the needles, the leaves, how they just move out away, and they're really flat, and overall the entire plant, you can see that those needles, the leaves, are more spread out. On these right here, the Procumbens nana, it's not quite so. They're more clumped together, and they're a little shorter, generally speaking, okay, than the garden juniper. Okay, color variation doesn't matter. It depends on whether or not they're well fertilized or not. The garden juniper, this one is in need of fertilization, might be missing minerals. Procumbens nana, nice and green. And so there is a difference in the varieties and types of junipers that you can use for bonsai, but there are some junipers, just like a lot of other trees, that are so close to each other they're misidentified or considered to be the same thing, which they're not. There is a difference. There is a difference. Again, that's my Sargent juniper, Juniper communis, and that's Sargent juniper, Shimpaku, Chinese juniper. You know, the Parsoni, not quite in the same category. Can't get lost or confused with any of these here, but there are other junipers that are somewhat similar to the Parsoni also. But again, that's just the way things are. Alright, let's walk around here and take a look at a few things. There we have Trident maple on a rock. And that is pretty nice. Trident maple. I call that a little owl. See the cut back right there? Right there. Looks like a little barn owl or something. But